So remember that the preposition apud can mean at the house of when we're talking about a singular person, but usually with plurals, it means among. And that's going to be the case here in Caesar. It's usually going to mean among. Purple prednoms, so you're not going to start with those. You're going to go to orgeterix fuit, and then we've got these two prednoms. Longe, another kind of interesting use of the adverb longe. Here, is far and wide or exceedingly. So longe here almost um, uh, makes nobilissimus and ditissimus even more impressive. In this slide, there's quite a bit going on. First, this is, the demonstrative is, ea, id, is probably one of the weakest demonstratives insofar as it can mean this, that, but it's also the closest thing to a third person singular or plural pronoun. So we always have talked about ego and tu and nos and vos, but Latin doesn't have an official third person pronoun because it can either be in the verb or it can be, very often there's a subject. But isea id will be used as the third person pronoun a lot. And so here, because it's masculine singular, it's going to be he, and that refers back to orgeterix. These brackets here indicate an ablative absolute, and they won't always be an ablative absolute, but a lot of the time they will. So, and this actually happens to be the way that um, the Romans would talk about what year it was, just like the Brits might say during the reign of Victoria, or during, in the States, during a certain president's term of office. They would say, you know, literally with Marcus Messala and Marcus Pupio Piso as consuls, but it would be when they were consuls, and then that would translate into the year. So this is an ablative absolute showing the time. Um, uh, Remember that a lot of times participles, especially when they are qualified by other words, they will, you should translate them after the pronoun or noun. So he, having been inductus by cubitate of regni. And regni here is a objective genitive. It's the object of his desire. Um, Persuasit takes a dative object, and then VMA indicates that there's going to be a construction that requires a VMA, a verb of mental activity. In this case, there are two different constructions. There's an indirect command and an indirect statement. And this is where it'll help to kind of remind yourself how to translate uts with different constructions. With an indirect command, usually you're going to translate ut as either to, and then to exerent, to leave, or you could say he persuaded them that they leave. But I think the more idiomatic English one would be he persuaded them to leave. And then indirect statement, if you have a VMA, you're going to put the word that there. So he persuaded them that, and then you're going to go into per facile esse. So you won't see this often that one verb introduces two different constructions, but you'll see it here and there. Remember that cum, if it is gray, it's going to mean when, since, or although. It'll be, if it's green, it's going to be with. If it's gray, it's a conjunction, so it's when, since, or although. And this is subjunctive kind of for two reasons. Number one, it's in a cum clause, but also usually if you're in an indirect statement, anything subordinate will have a subjunctive verb. And then this little nugget of text is tricky because potiri actually takes an ablative object. So it's a deponent verb that happens to take an ablative object. And then something that will help you a lot to remember is that there's a handful of adjectives slash pronouns that the ius is the genitive singular. So we've seen that in hic, haec, hoc, and the genitive is huius. Qui, quae, quod, the genitive is cuius. Isea, id, you'll see it's eius. So that ius, even though the us looks like a nominative, those are genitive singulars, and you'll see that quite a bit in Caesar. This is a good example of how you can kind of use the indents to help you out. This is the main clause here, And then, this is the secondary clause. And then these three lines are all parallel, and it's, on one side, on another, and on a third. And then each of them has a subordinate relative clause. So that's one place. I think grammatically this section isn't super difficult, but this is one place that if you had to kind of break it down, you can see that this is the main clause, this is subordinate to that, and then these three phrases are explaining this, and then they have even more subordinate clause. His rebus, this is another example of a connector that refers back to what happened before. Because of these things, and it's connecting because of the things I just mentioned, it happened that. And here are two examples of that kind of odd way that Caesar sometimes modifies adverbs with other comparative adverbs less widely and less easily. Qua ex parte, this is another phrase that literally means from which part, but we would translate it for this reason. So part is a word that can mean a lot of different things. So for which reason, so it's one of those connectors. Pro is a preposition that has a trillion different definitions, so definitely use the commentary whenever you see it because it can mean for. In this context, it means in proportion to. Here's a VMA, and then you can see because the blue infinitive, it's an indirect statement. So you're going to say that right after the verb. They were arbitrabantoring that. And then here we've got another reflexive pronoun. So you see the say, and you see that the verb is plural. So that means say is going to be plural. It's going to be they. And in this context, the say here is actually the subject of habere. Sometimes it's tricky in indirect statements when you've got two infinitives, but in this case, the first one, say, goes with habere. So they reckoned that they had narrow borders. And then this actually, milia passuum, you'll see this a little bit as well. Milia passuum literally means thousands of footsteps. And that's how the Romans measured a mile. And a Roman mile was a little shorter than our mile, but so CCXL, so 240 modifies milia, and it's showing like how long the territory was, and then this also modifies an implied milia passuum. So, but you'll see this. So milia passuum, you can translate it as miles, but it literally means thousands of footsteps.